Good morning, everyone. I can see we have Holly, and then we have an iPhone. Do you mind renaming yourself iPhone or introducing yourself in the chat? Holly, you can also do the same, just so we know where you're joining us from. I'm Simi. I am Grants and Investment Manager here at Do It Now, and I'm here alongside Olamide. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Olamide. I'm a portfolio manager with Impact in Urban Health. I'll share a bit more about the background around Impact in Urban Health shortly.
Thank you. And then we also have Vanessa from Southwark Council.
Hi there, I'm Vanessa. I'm the Climate Change Project Officer at Southwark Council. So yeah, just here to tell you a bit more about kind of Southwark and the context of climate and health.
Fantastic, thank you. Holly, do you want to, we're waiting for a few more people, so I'm happy for you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, that's fine. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I only heard about this webinar about 3 minutes ago through the Integrate Lambeth organisation. So apologies, a bit rushed and everything, but yeah, nice to be here. So I'm Holly from Trees for Cities, and we're based in Kennington Park in Lambeth. So my role is senior grants fundraiser. So I'm kind of always interested in new funding pots and opportunities. So we're predominantly a tree planting charity in urban areas. So we work with landowners and councils, local authorities to set up projects and then basically plant some trees. So yeah, looking forward to hearing about this fund and hopefully apply eventually.
Thank you. We have Joelle. Hi, Joelle. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi there. Yeah, sure. I'm Joel, one of the co-founders at Yes Make. We are based in Southwark. We use trees that come down in the city to create beautiful public spaces, normally working with community groups, young people, and people of all ages, really.
Thank you. Lovely to
nice to see you all.
And then iPhone, are you available to introduce yourself? Sorry, I'm not sure if you can hear us. No. Okay. I think we can get started. We're expecting a few more people, but hopefully they'll just join. So thank you everyone for joining today's session. As my colleague Idris said, we're here to sort of talk about the Climate Health and Communities Fund, which is a fund that's been created to support diverse-led organizations in Lambeth and Southwark. So Idris, do you mind going to the next slide, please? Fantastic. So as I shared before, I'm Simi. I'm Grants and Investments Manager at Do It Now. And just a bit about Do It Now. We are an organization that helps create social impact in Black communities and around the world. So our usual sort of funding mechanism is through what we call the Common Core Fund. And if you go onto our website, you'll see a bit more information about Common Core. But essentially, during the pandemic, we noticed that a lot of Black-led organizations, specifically charities and social enterprises, were finding it really difficult to access funding, and we're all about trying to create as much access as possible. And so we fundraised some money to essentially get the money to the communities that really needed it. You know, we know that typically Black-led organizations and diverse-led organizations find it difficult to access funding. So we were able to provide funding during COVID and beyond COVID. Hi, Agnes, nice to see you. And we're just doing a quick introduction, but maybe after this, I can allow you to introduce yourself. So yeah, we're providing funding, wraparound support, and just trying to basically engage organizations as much as possible to be able to support them where they've identified gaps that they need help with. So before we move on, Agnes, do you want to just introduce yourself? I'm Simi, Grants and Investments Manager at Do It Now, and we're just basically going through
Great. Hi everyone. Sorry, I couldn't log in, and then my Zoom started doing one of those updates at the time when I'm now trying to click on to get in. But my name's Agnes. I'm the founder of an organisation called Global Black Maternal Health. And we just recently were doing a flagship project looking at the impact of air pollution on pregnancy for Black and mixed heritage women in London and the surrounding areas. So that's kind of what's brought me here.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. Idris, do you mind going to the next slide? So I'll hand over to Olamide.
Yeah, thanks, Simi. Thank you again, everyone, for showing up today. Some of you might be aware of Impact in Urban Health. We're part of the Guy's and St. Thomas Foundation, which is a public funder for health issues in urban areas. And our main mission is to try to improve health outcomes and equity sort of across a range of complex health areas. So especially those within like urban environments. So we focus largely in Lambeth and Southwark as a place-based foundation. A lot of our work is focusing on sort of the built environment and how this affects people who live within them, where in most cases they are, there is a diverse mix of, different incomes, and it changes just between the space of sort of 15 minutes from Herne Hill to Tulse Hill. You have quite a range of, or Dulwich area, you have a range of health outcomes, and life expectancy, healthy life expectancy is around 15 years difference in between those areas. So the specific health, like complex health areas that we focus on, we do so on a long-term basis. And the ones that we're working on at the moment, it's the childhood obesity programs, which looks at, again, the built environment and access to healthy foods and affordable healthy foods for everyone. So it looks at, where children go to school, the home environment, as well as looking at market players that drive, as a whole, drive some of these health outcomes. We also look at health effects of air pollution. So that's, largely, what I've set out there around different areas and the impact of high levels of air pollution on vulnerable groups. And people in general, so thinking of young children, pregnant women, as Agnes has mentioned, as well as older people and those with existing health conditions, and how that, the quality of air around them impacts, their health outcomes, really their quality of life. And across that, we also work with a range of organizers, activists who, campaign around this, raise awareness around this for vulnerable groups, which is largely, again, Black and brown communities, children, pregnant women. So we also worked with an artist, Love Sager, who has set up exhibitions, and also around the Clean Air Day in July in Southwark Park, we had an awareness raising program. Or festival, which it was called Live and Breathe, which was sort of focusing on the fact that everyone has a right to clean air. And with that, it was sort of like a community focused event, and I think he'll be around later to sort of share a bit more, so I look forward to that. And also multiple long-term conditions, which is looking at how what it takes, what the factors that cause people from having one long-term condition to more than one, multiple long-term conditions. And it's usually surrounding sort of access to safe housing, safe and stable jobs, and financial opportunities, essentially. And then lastly, it's our recent program, which is actually children's mental health, not adolescent mental health. And that focuses on, again, in urban environments. We've identified that children who grow up in inner London areas are more likely to have onsets of behavioural difficulties. And so better understanding that and placing parents as sort of as the experts in managing, and working with children to have better health outcomes. So those are sort of the 4 areas that we cut across. And within that, we also have like a focus across the board. So anything else that might not necessarily fit within these programs, but mean that we need to be engaging better with communities, or we need to understand what are some of those challenges, the pillars of those communities, which we're finding are community-focused groups. What are some of those challenges that they are having in order to engage their communities, in order to remain sustainable, in order to have a viable business? And within that is where the Climate Health and Community Fund has been developed, because we need to be doing much more as a funder, where we recognise that climate change and health are so closely linked, you know, based on what I've mentioned, so closely linked, whether there's access to you know, green and blue spaces, public transport being available to a range of people. So the intention here is to just understand that and recognise how we can introduce that into our programmes that are existing now and those that are to come as well. I'll pass it back.
Thanks. Idris, you might, perfect, about the fund. So this is why you're all here, I'm guessing. Why we are doing this and what this is all about. So the climate, as Olamide has basically mentioned, we recognise that there is a climate and health crisis, and we recognise the sort of intersectionality between the two. So whether that's through air pollution, you know, heat waves, droughts and famines, the climate crisis is disproportionately affecting vulnerable people within our community. So there's been a lot of research, especially during COVID, around, you know, how any sort of health issue tends to disproportionately affect certain communities more than others. And that's why we've sort of identified Lambeth and Southwark as areas that really need the support. We know that there are organisations doing fantastic work, but unfortunately their voices are not always being the ones that are amplified. And so this fund is really an opportunity for us to support diverse-led communities, help them see the work that they're trying to establish through, whether that's through, you know, consulting advice, whether that's just through funding, and also really gain insight into, you know, what is actually happening on ground. So hopefully we can do more. So that's really what I would say we're trying to achieve and why we're sort of where we are today. Do you mind just going to the next slide? So we are offering organisations sort of 2 pots of funding, and the reason why we sort of split it into 2 is because we recognise that organisations are at different stages. So we know that there might be an organisation that's really established in what they're doing and has been sort of getting on with things and doing it for a long time and just need support to further their causes. But we also recognise that there might be organisations who haven't typically focused on climate change or air pollution or the environment or health specifically, but are able to recognise the issues within their communities and want to sort of incorporate that work in a way, but maybe don't know how to go about it or don't have the means. And that is, I guess, more suited to the pot 2. So pot 1 is £30,000 to £40,000 for anyone who can demonstrate work in this area with the aim to scale or develop projects. And we'll have a slide later on that kind of gives you an idea of what that can look like in terms of projects. You know, we're also at Do It Now really passionate about ensuring that we're not just providing funding, but we're also providing support to go along with that money. So we don't want to just give you money and say, okay, there you go, go away, spend it, enjoy. We want to be able to go on a bit of a journey with you and support you beyond the money. If you have any organizational needs where we can provide maybe workshops or somebody to come in and have a chat with you about how you can, I don't know, improve structure or, you know, improve funding techniques, whatever it is, fundraising techniques, sorry, whatever it is, we want to be able to incorporate that in the funding. And then pot 2 will be towards developing support. This might be to solve a specific issue that will help you define. So one of the biggest things we're actually offering is, like I said, with the Grants Plus model, you know, one-to-one support. You will be able to directly contact me, directly contact us if you have any specific questions about applying, or what you should be applying for, or how what you think you need fits into, you know, our aims and goals. So it's really about us sort of working together. We'll also support you in developing your final proposal. So I want you to have that sort of in your mind as you're sort of listening to what we're saying, because we understand that funding and accessing funding is not easy. Writing applications is not easy. It can be really daunting. Sometimes organizations, we find, don't identify themselves in some of the things that, some of the opportunities out there, but we want you to know that we recognize these organizations as really powerful, as impactful, and so we want to walk on this journey with you. So I just want you to bear that in mind as well as we continue. And oh yeah, please feel free to stop me if you have any questions as we're going along. So our fund aims really are to support inclusive climate action. We want to build on existing interventions, and we want to ensure that the climate conversation leaves no one behind. So we know that oftentimes people are already doing really fantastic work within their community, sometimes not even as part of anything, or I mean, anything they would consider really big, but they're getting the work done. And we know that there's things that we can do to support these conversations, to support whatever interventions are already existing, or ideas that don't exist because of one reason or the other. We recognize that there is a clear link between the climate crisis and poor health outcomes, specifically for racialized communities, and we want to ensure that we can help address these issues. It's not easy. We understand that this isn't something that, this area isn't something that is an easy one to tackle. Nobody really has the answers in its entirety, but we know that loads of people are contributing in their own unique ways. So we want to support that, and we want to just keep engaging with you all and just hearing from you and getting an idea of what exactly is that you need. Please, can we go to the next slide? So we've come up with a criteria around sort of what exactly we're sort of interested in funding. So if you can identify yourself in any of these 5 areas, we would really encourage you to apply. If you can't identify yourself in any of these areas, but you think, hold on, I'm doing very valuable work in this area, then that's where the one-to-one sessions come in, which we'll discuss a bit later, where you can reach out to us and discuss. So number 1, you're carrying out activities closely and directly linked to health that have a direct or indirect impact on reduction of carbon emissions, promoting biodiversity, or protecting the environment whilst improving people's health. So I think Agnes gave a really good example of the work that she's doing at the moment with maternal health and air pollution. So that would be an example of something that we'd be interested in hearing a bit more about. Number 2, you are carrying out activities that reduce the short or long-term impact of climate change and simultaneously improves people's health. So again, we really want you to know that whilst these criteria have been fixed, they are very much flexible in that, yeah, we recognize that we don't know it all, and there might be things that maybe you are doing that don't perfectly fit in, and that's really the purpose of the expression of interest form as well, to hear a bit more, but we'll get into that a bit later. Number 3 is you can demonstrate meaningful engagement with racialized Black and brown communities through activities. I would say this one is really important. So it goes beyond working within climate change. It goes beyond working within the environmental space, health, etc. We want to see how you're directly engaging with people who are on sort of facing the impacts and the effects of what we're talking about. We want to know that you're sort of working with them to support them in their everyday lives. Olamide made a really good point about the distance. It could be like 15 minutes, but the impact being so great in a specific area. So we're really interested to know that, you're advocating for these people and you're working really with them to help improve their lives. Your activities engage with communities in Lambeth and or Southwark. So with that, these are our sort of focused areas at the moment, Lambeth and Southwark councils, and obviously they're really close to one another. We recognise that they have a very concentrated, diverse population. So we're really interested to see what the work that's going on specifically in these areas. And then finally, you are a diverse-led community organisation or individual that identifies as racialised Black or brown peoples. So I think we've said this quite a few times already, but we recognise that funding generally is more difficult to come by if you are a Black-led or diverse-led organisation. And that's why not only are we putting this fund on, but we're hoping to be able to support you throughout your actual application. So I will pause now.
Just thanks, Simi. Thank you. Just to add on that, with the criterion for it being more so engaging with the communities and not necessarily having to be based there. You know, we're working with organisations that are also based in Lambeth and Southwark and want to continue doing that. But also that your activity actually also engages them. So you might be sort of working, you know, online influencing, and you know that people who tend to engage are, you know, around Lambeth and Southwark areas. So just to be a bit, you know, clear about that also.
Thank you. That's useful actually. Sorry. Cool. Okay. Now I don't know if you want to introduce our.
Yeah, well, I mentioned it just briefly. We'll just have a quick pause and share a bit from two of our speakers who are going to give us a bit of an overview of the work they've been doing that sits across that, you know, really key sort of intersection between climate and health, and engaging communities with that. So firstly, we'll pass to Love Sagar, who's an activist and artist who works across air pollution and climate change. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you for having me here. And actually, this is a good point because I'm in Lewisham, so I'm not in Lambeth or Southwark, but the people are. So that's the main thing. So yeah, and hi everyone. I put together, hopefully this is just going to be 15 minutes or so. It might be less, and maybe some questions after I'll go through it. But what I've done is I put together some slides of what I've been up to. So I first did a project on, I'm a musician, an artist. I first did a project which was mainly based around Lewisham, where I am, the South Circular. The story of Ella, Kissy, Deborah sort of spurred me on, obviously being a 9-year-old schoolgirl, dying of air pollution, having gone to a primary school off the South Circular, and I went to a primary school off the South Circular. So then when lockdown came and there was no touring, there was nothing in my normal arts life, there was an opportunity to look into something which affected my local community, and to see how I can use my platform to then engage the Black community in Lewisham. And then when that was seen, then Impact came along and then supported something in Lambeth and Southwark called Live and Breathe. So what I'm going to show you today, it might be a bit more towards my first Lewisham one, just because that was sort of like the grassroots starting up, which might be relevant here. But then you see a little bit of the Lambeth and Southwark work. But then there are videos for that, which I'm sure will be shared afterwards, which you can see. So let me just try and share this. Can you see that, everyone? Brilliant. Yeah. Okay, great. So this is a billboard. So Julie's Bicycle and Seasons for Change, which was Arts Admin and Julie's Bicycle, they had a thing where they put out a call to say, they put out a call to reach out to people from marginalized communities to challenge something within the space of climate justice, and to use an art form. So my whole thing is to use art as a way of activism and an entry point for people to do stuff. So I was like, okay, let me just tell my story. Here I am standing on the South Circular. Very exciting. Yeah, that was a press shot. But then I knew with my platform, it could get some press coverage in the local newspaper, because I started this band a while back called Clean Bandit, which kind of helps. And then they covered it, Evening Standard, South London Press, and then just talking and trying to engage with the community. And I wanted to use that video, Our World Fight for Air. It was just a 3-minute music video, and the riff was, do we really care? Yeah. Because when people start talking about activism, it's not just, I think it's useful for people to be getting arrested on the streets and doing all of this other stuff, but that's not quite for me. But we can do it in different forms. So if you're going to go into schools, then how do you engage people in schools? And that was a big thing, where if I was going to sort of take a nod to the work that Rosamund's been doing and the foundation there, and I wanted to speak to people that of that age, I can't just go in there and say, oh, air pollution is going to kill you and stuff. So what I thought was quite nice is I commissioned my cousin Andrew up in Edinburgh to make a comic, a little zine. So, and the reason here with Project Earth is I could take this to different primary schools, and it's just stories where they could see people of color in these climate stories, whereas normally you don't see people of color in these stories. So if they can see themselves in there, if they can see it, and it's not just think about the polar bears and everything else, because air pollution is a bit of it's a silent killer, but it affects us right here, right now. And I think with COVID, that just hammered home when we saw the loss. So it all came apparent to me too, because when COVID came, we saw the losses of Black and brown people on the front line, and it's like, wait, why is this happening here in the UK and not back home in, let's say, in the subcontinent or in Africa or in West Indies? You know, Black and brown people weren't dying in the same numbers as here, and it's like where we live. So if by living on the sides of the road, living on these dual carriageways and everything like that, where these big lorries are coming, then it's affecting us. That's why, you know, our kids, our little brothers, sisters, children, nieces, nephews, they've got asthma pumps, more of them. So, but the first thing is say, okay, look, where's a story where they can see themselves here? That was the first thing. And then fortunately, it was my aim to go back to my primary school. And I did that. So I went back and then I gave them a talk. They're all like, oh my goodness, you're so old. Because I just put out dates. I was like, I was here in like 1990 something. I think I put a date like 90, what was it? Let me think. It was like 93. And then they were like, oh my God. Like it was 1893. And I'm like, oh, relax, people. But no, it was cool. But they listened. And then again, it's like, how can you engage? You can go in there with art. And again, I went in with a poster. So it's different when I'm going to speak to adults as opposed to like young people. So again, I gave them this poster, and I need to go back and check what they filled this in. But it was just two things. What makes the air dirty? What makes the air clean? Because again, we're not trying to divide and conquer and then say, oh, this person's mom drives a 4x4 with diesel. Oh, this person takes the bus, so they're good. You know, you don't want to be creating these divisions or making people feel like they don't have a voice. So it's just these things to say, okay, well, what makes the air clean? Okay, well then, maybe we can look to plant some more stuff like here, some more trees and everything to soak that up. What makes it dirty? Oh, okay, well, it's coming from here. It's coming from all these different sources. And then in their own words. And another thing is, because it was lockdown, then that showed me the power of like local community, because I've been traveling with my music in all different places. But then when we were stuck in lockdown, we had to stay we had to stay where we were, and that shouldn't limit your creativity. So I said to them, look, Lewisham, we're called Blue Borough because everything's blue, the bins, the signs, everything. So on this little poster, it's like, look, you got the little Lewisham thing, you got the little cat, you got these little figures, you know, you can do it yourself. That's the clock tower in Lewisham town center, which is not very impressive, but anyway. But again, it's like, look, if you've got access to just a camera phone, whether it's your parent, whether it's an uncle or something, get them to take pictures, put that together so you can make your own artwork. And yeah, here were the different things. And then for the adults, then it was like, okay, well, there was a chance. I worked with Purpose on this as well, which is a social impact agency, which is good. So again, I think people, see what connections you have, and then to see if you can try and make some links to reach out with people. So even if you're community-based things and it's like, I might run a youth club, then reach out to maybe some of the young people, because they might help you get on TikTok. I'm not really on TikTok, but they might help you in different ways. to get the message out on Instagram or somewhere else. So then that might be something. So again, it's to get these colorful images. So even though we're talking about climate change, air pollution and stuff, try and make it colorful and stuff. And then we put these around. This is up in New Cross. And then a little QR code, which then people could scan, then see the video. Then this was around local elections. This was in 2020. Yeah, so people could then scan through and then read, or maybe it was 2021. Anyway, I can't remember. Pandemic has ruined my timelines. But again, we put these up in Lewisham, in New Cross, Lewisham High Street, here just outside Lewisham Hospital. And again, these had like the little tearaway comic things, which people could come and, people could come and take with them. Because again, yeah, I can make a video, I can put things online. You can say do social media, Instagram. There is digital poverty. So you want people to feel involved, where it's like, look, how can we get involved in something if we don't have as many megabytes as somebody else? And just make it fun, make it different. So that was quite cool. And then there was a hashtag for the campaign, which was good. And then excitingly, this is a quite good day because there's COP27 in Egypt. But a year ago, I was in, where was I? I was in Glasgow. Yeah, talking about this, showing the little people of Lewisham. No, we're not little people, but you know what I mean. Again, this panel was called Climate. No, it was called Arts, Culture, the Missing Link. So it was a big thing. There's Alison from Julie's Bicycle, and then there's, because this was the blue zone, so that's why we've got this government thing, all very serious. Es Devlin, who does Adele's shows, Kanye shows, like loads of people's shows anyway, big people shows, Lord and stuff like that. She was there talking about how she uses stage design and all of these different things and stuff. We had Elif Shafak, who's an author, amazing author, how she uses storytelling. And then I was just a host because I like to talk, and I showed the video as well, which was great because when we made the video, that was a community. I just went out and was like, people, do you want to be in this video about air pollution? They were like, yeah. And that's their climate activism. It's not sign a petition, go to the local council. It's not just that. We should find different ways and make it better. Yeah, so then the next step is, and this is where Impact came along, because then they saw this was, and actually it was really nice because speaking to Kate and Rachel over at Impact in the air pollution team, because they were the first people I spoke to before I started all of this stuff, because I was like, okay, who's in this thing with health and air pollution? How can I get the facts? I can do the art and everything, but it's like, how can I get the facts? So when people are like, oh, cool, all right, we like your thing, how do we find out more? And that's the big thing. That's the nice thing, having, Impact on urban health and all the different links there that they can then signpost onto campaign groups like Choked Up, or whether it's British Lung Foundation, Asthma UK, other people who have that knowledge. So it's not just, we're not just making noise for the sake of making noise. People coming to us can then go, so don't feel like you have to have the answers for everything. That's not the point. The point is being community where we do what we can. So then that's why it was like, okay, let's do something in Lambeth and Southwark, which is super exciting. Because it meant more billboards. So anyway, to show this, again, there's another video. So I went to Philharmonia South Bank, Royal Festival Hall, it's the orchestra there. And I got them, I composed some new music. I said, do you want to be involved in this? I want to make like a superhero theme tune. And then they were like, yeah, they gave me some musicians, went down to Abbey Road, recorded that, and then went out to different community groups in Lambeth and Southwark because there was a longer lead time. So if we see here in the top left corner, we've got, that's Peckham BMX, where Kai White, the first silver medalist from Tokyo Olympics, first silver medalist for Team GB at the Olympics for BMX. Kai White was from Peckham BMX club in Burgess Park. So we've got Olympians here. So we've got, from a health issue, imagine we're getting gold medals. If you want to be Team GB out here, and we're not, our young people have substandard air, then how does that kind of work? And even for the people who don't want to be Team GB, who just want to do cycling for fitness and for fun, what are we saying to them? It's like, yeah, train hard and do everything, but we're not doing enough as people, as local government, as adults, as whoever it is, to make sure you've got the clean air, or even the air that we had when we were growing up, when it's getting worse and worse and worse. Then this one, you got Poetic Unity here. And then Jada David, she came up with a beautiful poem, which is again on one of the videos, which we put out on TikTok and did a whole campaign. But and then there's Aisha and Mr. Reed, and they came out with their own poems based on the music. So all these different groups sent the music to, and then this is how they saw the health emergency and climate emergency, which is also the racial injustice as well, you know, and it's all these different injustices, they all compound on top of each other. This is, and then that's Neon Elevate, who are based in Vauxhall, who are a performing arts group. And again, it's interesting because before getting involved with the photo shoots and everything like that, I went and I spoke to them and I said, look, do you want to be, this is about air pollution and stuff, and climate change, and, you know, and how it's linked to your health and everything like that. Do you want to be involved? And all these people said yes. And then having said that, and this is a good thing about having the support, is to have the support to do something which then looks good. So you're not going into community and saying, look, give us your time. And by the way, people will pay for their time here. So it's like, give us your time. So where you can pay. If you can't, then try and provide something. So then it's like, oh, it's something which they can then use. So it's not just a transfer of knowledge in one direction. So, but then to them, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to make sure I'm going to do my best as an artist to show that you're in the best light. So Cece runs some roller skating in different parts of Southwark, and she's been fantastic. And she was in the original video, and then she's great at reaching out to, you know, people. They call the Corona rollers, because again, people wanted to go outside during COVID times, and then that got that in terms of being active, healthy and active. So you want to do that, and it's good. Roller skate, it all picked up, and it was quite easy entry. But then you've got to think, okay, well, now we're doing this. What about, can we improve our health and the air quality around us? So then we're being active, but then we're not being hindered by this health. And then there's Zion from Peace Ballers, who runs a young footballing sort of after school thing at Harris Academy in Peckham as well. So you can see all different groups. And what I want to do is it's colorful again, you know, bright colors. And then they wanted to have a day, an event, Live and Breathe Day. So they had, so then we had to organize it. But then it was a chance again for the community to come together and say, look, this is why we want clean air. That's the clean message. We're not just doing it to complain. It's because we want to get on with these activities which bring us together and everything else. And whilst we're doing that, we don't want to be in danger. We don't want our health to be in danger. So yeah, then there was some more posters around Brixton, this round Flatiron Square. And this is the beauty of it. When you've got this opportunity, and I think this is fantastic, what's being planned. The beauty of this is like, so Aisha, she said this billboard that went up, it went up outside a place that she got fired from after 3 weeks. So it's just around the corner. And then she was like, you know, look at me now. So this is the sort of thing of, by having a campaign, having something which is positive, you can then get to show people in their best light. And then for whatever circumstances, this is another way in which you can sort of be involved in something where at least we can put you front and center. You know, the first video is just me, because that's my story. But then here, this is people who live in or work or socialize in Lambeth and Southwark. So it's like putting them out, you know, out and about. And here's just a picture with the Mayor of Southwark and some of Neon Performing Arts by Southwark Bandstand, and then CC. So, so yeah, so that's a quick run through of what I've been kind of doing. But yeah, there's different entry points to doing stuff, but at least if you can see, it's a very simple idea first off, where use what you have. For me, it's the art, music, creativity, and then to say, okay, what is the entry point? What are my aims? Okay, am I trying to get into the local schools? Okay, how can this relate to them? What can I sort of do at that level? Or is it, I want to make a big noise, so let me have a bigger campaign, which then ends up being covered on Radio 4. It's covered, you know, on a documentary there. It's then covered, it goes to like COP26. So it's surprising, do what you can do. But even if it seems small, it might have larger ripple effects in larger media. And now we're trying to continue Live and Breathe and trying to build it as well, because when all the groups that were involved, I think there were about 19 different community groups, and I went to every single one of them, they all are energized, because again, it's showing that people care about their health, their well-being, and trying to do something positive when everything around them now is negative, you know? So it might be heavy, but if you do it in a fun way, it can be positive. And that's what we really, 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 really need. And it makes a difference. You know, it builds up the self-esteem of these people. And then they become the ambassadors and they become the spokespeople for their area and their own concerns. And it dispels, which was my original aim when people go, oh, Black people or people of color don't care about climate change. So, well, let's see about that, you know. And then you might find that these people can explain it better than some of these crusty politicians who are just there for a check and aren't actually doing anything for us, you know? So, yeah, so that's it really.
Thank you so much, Sega. That's really interesting to see, isn't it? I think the key message there is just having that passion to get people involved, you know, in whatever way that you know how. And if you're already doing that, you know, that level of engagement with community, then you're halfway there. So yeah, just keep it up. Thank you so much.
Shall I just ask, so freestyling, does anybody have any little quick questions? Because I think I can fire a couple questions for a few minutes since we're ahead of time. I don't want to take over your thing. But yeah, does anyone have any? If not, then no worries.
You can throw it in the chat. Also, we'll have a Q&A towards the end as well. But if there's something you want to, you know, just clarify, how did you get those billboards up there, or how many people, you know, got involved, then yeah, feel free to shout.
Yeah, and I think the main thing, just to say, first of all, it was really refreshing kind of seeing your work. I'm from Lewisham as well.
Hey.
So seeing the cat, seeing the blue bin, you know, it definitely appreciated that. And I think it's what resonated with me was when you said about, you know, how as a community we're already experiencing so much negativity through no fault of our own. It's just the way the world is at the moment, particularly when we're talking about Black and brown communities, and how, you know, we should just be thinking about how can we communicate these very key issues in a positive way. So there's that balance there of obviously saying that this is what it is, but we don't want to be like trauma porn, like this is just what it is, it's trauma, and keep feeling that how can we that's definitely food for thought in terms of some of the work that I'm doing, and so forth. So I just wanted to share that and to say
thank you. Yeah, no, thank you. Just quickly, what's the work that you're doing?
Okay, so I'm a founder of an organisation called Global Black Maternal Health.
Okay.
And we've just been doing a project actually with impact on urban health. So that's why I need to ask if I'm allowed to be here. But around the impact of air pollution on pregnancy, particularly looking at black women in London. So we've done like a huge survey. We had over 400 respondents come in and so forth. So we've got quite a lot of data from South London in particular. And just even hearing their stories of air pollution. If you ask them, for example, what is your impact? How much do you know about the impact of air pollution on your health or that of your baby or whilst you're pregnant? Literally 95% will say they don't know anything. When you dig deeper later on, they're like, yeah, I got asthma, I was hospitalized 3 times when I was pregnant. I'm indoors, there's mold in my house, but if I open up the window, you know, the heat's going out. So you choose between keeping your house warm. My baby's coughing up, my newborn baby has got respiratory issues, etc. So it's about the language. So from the data that I have, we've just literally closed the survey on Friday. We are going to have the launch at Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecology on the 15th of June, so you'll all be invited to that. But from just that findings, what it is that it's the language that we're using to talk about air pollution that is disengaging our communities, because they know, just like what you said, they know what's going on. It's our babies, it's when we're pregnant, especially if you've got asthma, that is causing our air quality to be completely diminished. But because of the language, and I personally, and I don't know if I'm going off topic, think that when we just focus and say climate change, if you've got somebody who's in a moldy house, whose baby can't breathe properly, they're not thinking about the climate and what's going to happen in 50 years. They're thinking about their baby and why the council's not sorting them out, or their private landlord. That's what they're thinking about. So through the data and the work that I'm doing, it's trying to see how we can readdress that, so we have language that is more inclusive, so that our communities feel that they are a part of this and they know that they are, and then they can lead from the front.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, that's great work that you're doing. And I think that is the key, because when I was launching these campaigns, it's been going on for the past 2 years. So we've had COVID, And we've had cost of living, and it's the same thing where people are like, wait, hold on. And then you got low traffic neighborhoods into the mix, which is like another story. For me personally, that doesn't necessarily come into my mix, just because if we win the fight and get rid of low traffic neighborhoods, we still got the pollution. So so I put that to one side. But yeah, exactly. It's finding a way in which to connect with people and then see how all of these things are interlinked. And this is just sort of anecdotal from my experience. When you say air pollution and stuff, then they're like, why should I bother when I'm just trying to get to work? You know, I'm trying to do all of this stuff. But then if you say, wait, but hold on a minute, is your journey to work a bit more difficult because they've cut your bus routes, you know? So even if you wanted to take the cleaner thing to work or to the hospital, is that more difficult for you, you know? So, and then if that is, then you've got to say, well, who's cutting these things? And would I prefer this? And for me, one of the longer term goals is, imagine if public transport was free. So then I'm not attacking people with their car. Keep your car, especially
options.
Exactly. So it's like to say, okay, look, where can we give people the options which will then make their life better, you know, make your day-to-day life better? Because if it means I take one bus to work, I don't need to rush, you know, and there are all these other different lifestyle things which then come in, and then you're not really under pressure. And then it comes into all of these other concerns, which then relate more on the day-to-day. And we need to be paying attention to, you know, to be paying attention to this. So,
exactly. And just to add on to that, I mean, if we're talking about rail strikes and stuff, if you're a mum and you've got 2 kids and you need to get them to school so that you can go to work, and you don't have reliable transportation, you're going to lose your job. You're going to use a car. Like, it's just what it is, you know. So there's so much in regards to how we can all support one another, first of all, just as a collective, because we're all doing that work, but also then individually, that we're all coming from different lenses, and then, but you know, it will make a big noise once we kind of get there.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you both. No, that's a key point there that we got to hold on to. I think language is something that we're seeing, you know, that is definitely being raised, and I think Vanessa might also pick up a bit on that as well, based on some of the work that we've been doing in Southwark. So Vanessa is part of the climate team at Southwark. If you want to introduce yourself, share a bit more about what's been going on there.
Cool, yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Vanessa. I'm on the climate change team at Southwark Council. It's a fairly new team. We've done a bit of work with Impact on Urban Health before. Like, we're obviously aware of the great work that they're doing. We know that our work intersects a lot with things like air quality, health, and really excited to hear about the launch of this fund. So we wanted to make sure we were present and could talk a little bit about our understanding of kind of some of the issues in Southwark specifically around climate and health, and also looking at our citizens jury, which we ran, and how that kind of engaged a like wide cross section of people who are not normally kind of typically engaged through like consultation on climate change, and kind of, you know, are lifting their voices up a bit. So I'll talk about that as well. I'm just gonna share my screen. I've not shared the screen on Zoom in a while, so just reminding myself what to do. Okay. I'm guessing, sorry, the slides didn't come through to you guys today. But but you are there. So I'm just trying to figure out how to actually get it uploaded. My bad. I'm gonna do that. I think I thought it would just show my files, but it's not doing that, so sorry. Okay, I think I've got it now. My bad. Thanks. No, I'm used to Microsoft Teams, so bear with me. Sorry about that. Okay, great. So I will put full screen on. So the first thing I'm just going to talk about is just a brief bit of context about Southwark Council and the climate emergency. So we declared a climate emergency in 2019. Since then, we have developed a strategy and action plan, which was published in 2021. We recognise there's always more we could be doing. Part of why we want to be here today is to talk about kind of linking in more with what's going on in the community, because at the moment our strategy and action plan is quite internal facing, so we want to make sure that we're reflecting properly what's actually going on in the borough and more broadly. And yeah, this includes a 2030 net zero target. So we're trying to make sure that we're not polluting as much carbon as we are kind of like, yeah, net zero carbon basically in the environment by 2030, which is more ambitious than the government's target, but there's a lot of challenges that come with that. One of the kind of main things that we highlight in our strategy and action plan is around the need for a just transition. So that's recognising that you can't kind of, like the climate crisis and economic and social justice are interrelated, which is obviously something that other people have touched on already today. And also recognising that, you know, on the main, carbon emissions are emitted by those who have the most to spend. So not expecting people on the lowest incomes to kind of, you know, do the most to tackle climate change. That's not how it should be, because those are not the people who got us into this situation in the first place. So yeah, understanding that just transition is also understanding that, yeah, tackling the climate emergency needs to be made equitable and understand individual residents' needs. And yeah, and obviously that means as of the COVID-19 crisis, that exacerbated a lot of health issues that already existed specifically for Black and minority ethnic communities, also for women, those with disabilities. So again, with climate change, we're already seeing it happening globally, that it's affecting kind of like the diaspora in kind of global south and so on. So we don't want that to be the case in this country as well. So we need to be thinking about how those issues intersect with one another. And yeah, and also already like there are issues facing Southwark specifically that are climate change related. So there's flood risk in Southwark. We've seen really hot summers in the last few years that obviously get more people getting unwell from extreme heat, and we're not really equipped to deal with that in this country. So that's something that we need to be thinking about as well. And also just things like, as we've already mentioned, air quality. So 200 people died prematurely from poor air quality. We found in our 2019 kind of survey that we do about health across the borough. And we also found that 70,000 people were food insecure in Southwark. So that kind of comes onto health as well, because that's people who basically are struggling to find food for their next meal. So those things all do also link into climate, because we look at things like food chain, we look at things like carbon emissions and how those are affecting air quality. So yeah, and these are things we're conscious of when we're doing our work in Southwark Council, that we know that we do need to kind of align with transport strategies around clean air and access to kind of more active modes of transport that you know, enable health. And air quality obviously also comes into the way transport is managed, and other projects we do. And sustainable food as well is also key. We're doing a strategy on that, so climate change are linked into that as well. So that's around, yeah, making sure that people have access to like healthy food, and this is done fairly. So yes, next slide. So yeah, I just thought, yeah, it might be good to just include a few things around how climate change intersects with health more broadly, because I think that, as was mentioned by earlier speakers, I think it's not always clear how climate change impacts people's day-to-day lives, and people are struggling to, you know, pay their bills or, you know, make ends meet. It's not really always going to be at the forefront of your mind, but I think tackling climate change will also help us to address a number of other issues that can have a positive impact on people's day-to-day lives. So, for example, if we can retrofit homes, so that means kind of improving insulation, making sure that just the general quality of the home inside is, you know, not letting heat out. That will really help people with fuel bills. As we know, we're in a fuel crisis at the moment, and, you know, and then cost of living crisis. So if people have access to kind of homes which are not leaking as much energy, we won't need to worry as much about people having to pay high bills. So that's also like really key. And active transport, that's another one, as obviously mentioned earlier as well, like tackling issues like obesity among children and adults. By encouraging things like cycling and walking, we can also improve air quality and reduce carbon emissions by getting cars off the road and so on. Another one is around clean air, as already mentioned. So yeah, making sure, and that includes obviously, you know, yeah, that's just making sure that transport is cleaner, and construction as well as a key one where air can get polluted. So making sure that kind of yeah, like practices around that are improved can also mean that people just have access to better health, which I don't need to remind people here of impact on urban health. They obviously know all about clean air. And another one that I just wanted to mention was around tackling food insecurity and enabling healthier diets. So that really does, as I mentioned earlier, link into climate change as well, because yeah, access to kind of sustainable diets is key to also like protecting the planet. You know, if we eat more healthily, that also reduces carbon emissions. But equally, for people who are struggling with food poverty, that doesn't necessarily mean they should just have to access food that's in food banks. It's just tinned food, or, you know, food that's non-perishable. We should also be thinking about giving people access to sustainable diets as well that can improve health. For example, someone that volunteered before in Harrow, they really had a focus on that. They made sure they weren't just giving people the bare minimum of like tinned goods and pasta. They were also giving people fresh fruit and veg that they were donated by supermarkets. So I think that's a really key thing as well to thinking about climate change and food. And finally as well, like protecting green spaces and increasing the green spaces we have. That obviously is also good for addressing climate change because that builds resilience. So trees and like water spaces like ponds are actually really good for when there's heavy rainfall, or they can provide shelter when it's really hot. But equally, they are really important for people's physical and mental well-being. Like, you know, during COVID-19, for people who have no garden, parks are absolutely crucial to making sure that we were healthy and doing the activities we wanted to do. So yeah, just making sure that those are protected and enhanced basically is, yeah, crucial to health and climate change. So yeah, the other thing I wanted to speak about was around our citizens jury on climate change, which we ran from late last year until earlier this year. So I think it was like November to March. We wanted to do this because, as I already mentioned, climate change is not something that we always manage to engage people from every cross sector of the borough on. And I know that's kind of an issue nationally, that it can be a very certain demographic of kind of white middle class people, quite frankly, who are often kind of put forward to talk about climate issues. And we wanted to kind of show that, you know, those are not the only people who can talk about these issues, and actively engage people from Black and minority ethnic communities, from different age groups, people with different perspectives on climate change, just to show that they're represented in how we're addressing the issue. And also because climate change is going to affect everybody, so it's important that everybody gets a say. So the question that we had put forward was, what needs to change in Southwark to tackle the emergency of climate change fairly and effectively for people and nature? We worked with an organisation called Shared Future, who are like a community interest group who have experience running other kind of citizen-led decision-making processes. So they do these kind of processes for other issues around health and like housing and so on. So they basically helped us to get 25 residents from across the borough who were representative of the demographics of Southwark. So that was through an organisation called the Sortition Foundation. They kind of are really experienced in taking samples of population data and kind of finding and then getting sort of postcodes to then send letters out to these people to kind of say, we'd be interested in having you in our jury. We had like over 1,000 people come back and be interested, but we ultimately selected it down to 25 who we felt were kind of the most representative of what we were looking for. So yeah, so that was back earlier in the year, and it actually took place over 10 weeks. And we asked the jury to put forward 20 different recommendations. And it was interesting that actually a lot of these did kind of intersect with health issues as well. So there were recommendations around health and well-being and using buildings as a way of kind of facilitating better health and well-being. There was also recommendations around fuel poverty, so addressing this through the way that we design buildings. And air quality was also key. So there was a lot of focus on walking and more sustainable modes of transport. So the residents of Southwark also had identified that as a key area where climate policy can make a difference. And the top recommendation they actually made was around walking, making the borough better facilitated for allowing people to walk. There's a lot of busy, congested roads in Southwark and in Lambeth, so it's important that people have access to that, and it's obviously a free method of transport as well. So, so yeah, those are kind of the key areas of our jury. I wanted to just play a little video of one of our jury members talking about her experience. So this is Angel, who's one of our 25 jury members. She was someone who kind of said herself, she'll say in the video, that she previously wasn't someone who thought hugely about climate change. It wasn't something that was on her radar as much. And she became one of our most active jury members. She had such an amazing input into what we did. And she came along to one of our council cabinet meetings to talk about her experience in the jury. So yeah, just thought rather than me talking this whole time, might be good to hear Angel, although actually if you're
we can't hear this, I'm afraid.
Oh, I just wonder if that was going to happen. Okay, let me see if I can. It's possible to share sound on here as well. I don't know if it is. I can just thinking what the way of doing this would be. Yeah, I'm not sure if it is going to share the sound actually. Let me see. Yeah, probably not.
Don't worry, just if you give us
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm not sure, but never mind. I'm not sure if it's going to work. But yeah, did wonder if that would happen. I will go back to the video, but yeah, that was just basically somebody who was really, really engaged, and it was really nice to see that it did manage to basically attract people who weren't the kind of usual vocal groups we sometimes get on climate change, essentially, because I think it gave us a much more varied look at people's lived experience in the borough and how climate issues are affecting them, basically. So and that was this is just like a little bit more information about that. So really it did succeed in kind of bringing in people from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds that were representative of Southwark. Brought in people who didn't initially have a kind of who were identified as not being worried about climate change. Later they sort of said they had changed their mind and they were. There was also there was someone who was actually really not that worried about climate change as well. So it was really quite an interesting mix of people. Also, just we kind of were thinking a lot about barriers to engagement and why people might not be always engaged in climate change issues. And kind of two of the key things in that were making sure that people were paid for their time, and also kind of removing barriers to engagement, such as taking it for granted that people know how to use Zoom or know how to get onto Teams and things like that, which I think we're kind of just even giving people calls. So Shared Future, who we worked with, are really good at doing that, making sure that people just kind of were reminded of meetings that were coming up, checking in that they knew how to access the tech, because I think those are barriers to engagement that I think is like kind of a society who's very like tech able now. We kind of forget that some people are left behind and don't know how to do that. So I think that's crucial for engaging people around any issue, but including climate change. We kind of recognised we wanted to do at the council something to reflect like the recommendations that were made to us. So the top ones were around walking, and there was also recommendations around kind of improving tree coverage and biodiversity. And obviously those also intersect with health. So again, interesting that those are some of the key things that were picked up by people. So we've pledged additional funding towards those areas. We also add some actions into our climate change action plan to kind of, so we put in some actions. People wanted more cycle training for young people, disabled cyclists, and for cargo bikes. So that was something we added into our action plan. And as already mentioned, like clearly health and climate were an area that people were wanting to draw attention to. I guess the final thing that we kind of wanted to mention in this presentation was that, as I mentioned earlier, we're aware that the climate work we do within the council definitely could be more outward facing, and even though we've done the jury, we don't want that to be the only kind of interaction we have with the wider borough on issues of climate and health. And we see the opportunity put forward through Impact on Urban Health and Do It Now through the funding as a good way of us kind of speaking to community groups who give us insights into climate change and health that we might not otherwise have ourselves. So we wanted to kind of just highlight that we want to keep up this like kind of dialogue with wider community groups to better inform our strategy and action plans. So we're reflecting priorities that exist within communities in the borough, because again, during COVID-19, I think a lot of the work that the council managed to support on for residents was led by the voluntary and community sector. So we recognise that you guys have the kind of best insights into what residents need, where the residents most in need are. So again, with climate change, that is something that we really need to be keeping an eye on as well. So that's important. Also, as a team, we work closely with other teams like transport and housing and air quality. So I think we're quite happy to kind of act as like a bit of like a kind of inroad to kind of engaging with other teams if you have questions or like advice that you want from like a kind of council perspective. We can try and do that as well. And we do also have like a comms and engagement officer, and we like have like a kind of empowering communities team. So we're quite happy to use these teams in the council to kind of try and link into work that you might already be doing, work that you put forward through this grant, because there are some connections that we might be able to help facilitate to kind of make those things happen, and to kind of also like talk about your work. If there are events that you want to get people along to, we can kind of help promote those as well. So yeah, that was kind of everything. Sorry about that video not having sound, but I didn't know if that would happen. And yeah, that's kind of everything. I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Thanks so much, Vanessa. Yeah, I think it's good to see what's available in the local area for people to connect with their local councils, and it's kind of great to see also that the same sort of conversations we've already started having here about what really does link health and climate are also picked up by the council. And I don't know, do you see how people might is there any way that people could connect? Like, do you have any details around that if they did want to connect with the team?
Just, I mean, you can just drop me an email, and I'll put my email in the chat. I mean, at the moment, like I said, we've got this content engagement officer now. We would like to be thinking about ways that we could be kind of having more kind of resident facing sessions. It's kind of a work in progress, let's just say. But as individuals, like, you know, with events like today, we're more than happy to kind of come along and like engage. So yeah, I'll put my email in the chat, and then just drop me an email if you have anything you want to ask about.
Great, thank you. And I think it was Shared Future, right, that you referred to, that worked with the citizens jury.
Yeah, it was them. Yeah, and I think you helpfully put the report in the chat. So yeah, they were really good at getting kind of the right people involved with our process. So yeah.
Thank you. All right, I'll pass it back to Simi to go through just a bit of the timelines, and then we can ask. Please feel free to ask questions that you might have. Think them up.
Thank you so much. So I think Vanessa's slide on, you know, connecting climate change to everyday life is probably better than what I'm about to project. But you know, we just wanted to give you an idea of potential areas of funding that we would be interested in. But like I said before, you are the ones sort of on the ground, you know exactly what's working, you know what people are asking for, so it doesn't have to fit into these boxes. It's just to give people a bit of an idea. So developing urban gardens, improving people's health, protecting the environment, educating young people or your local community on ways to reduce impact on climate and health, sustainable food drives, production, promoting green technologies and jobs, recycling. So these are the sorts of things that, you know, we've heard that people are sort of getting involved with. But like I said, this list is not exhaustive, and we're really interested to actually hear from you. Idris, do you mind going to the next slide? Olamide, did you want to add anything?
No, you mentioned it, that it's not exhaustive at all. It's, yeah, so whatever has that interconnection, whether it's sports with young people, you know, and take them out into the countryside and so on, that sort of thing would be also included.
Thank you. So do you mind going to the next slide, and we'll come back to this slide after? Actually, I think I should have went in a different order. Fantastic. So the process. So we're in sort of November now, up until December. So we have, the way it will work is we'll have an expression of interest form open formally next week, Tuesday, so on the 15th of November at not 2033. I've just noticed that typo. This year, obviously, next week from 12 p.m. So that form, the slide before, we can go through it just to give you a bit of an idea of what to expect. But essentially, that form will be an opportunity for us to hear from you, hear about your potential ideas. It's not set in stone. Whatever you put in there, you don't have to follow through with. Essentially, we're just trying to gather as much information as possible around what is actually going on ground, and also obviously give you the opportunity to share how you would choose to spend any money that you could potentially receive. And within that, we're also going to be giving you the opportunity to have a one-to-one session with myself. So whilst when the link goes up on the website for the expression of interest, there'll also be a link to like a Calendly link where you can basically book time in with me for between sort of 20 minutes to half an hour, where we can actually go through that expression of interest form together, and you can ask me any questions that you might have. If you need any further clarity, the expression of interest form will also come with an application guidance document. and an FAQs document. So we're hoping that we're covering all bases. We're going to make sure that we really explain exactly what we're looking for after every single question, but we understand that sometimes it's nice to just have a chat with someone. And we really do want this process to be a process of learning. We're not trying to catch anybody out. So there are no trick questions in there. If you're genuinely not sure about anything, I'd really encourage you to book onto one of those sessions with me so we can just have a chat. Then the deadline will be in January. So we have quite an open application window, which hopefully will be useful for you to all sort of go through the form, digest it, book in a session, and still have time to develop, to answer the question. So second week in January, the deadline will be the deadline for expression of interest. And then we'll move into sort of reviewing those applications internally. And anyone who's basically been successful from the expression of interest form will be invited to submit a more formalized proposal. Now with this, again, we will walk you through that process. We will book time in with you to sort of develop that. Is actually co-produced proposal. So the idea is that we sort of work on it together. And we're also going to have an organisation health check where a member of our research and impact team and myself will sort of sit down with you, sort of, I guess it would be probably a Zoom call, and just go through, you know, your organisation more generally, look at structure, look at areas where you feel, you know, then you need support with improving, or maybe you're interested in exploring a bit. And then through that process, if you're successful in receiving the grant, the health check will sort of inform the additional support that we give you throughout. So it's a really good opportunity to, I guess, look a bit more holistically at your organization. And then, so that will be sort of February time. March, we'll then have grants panels where we'll make a decision on who receives funding, and we'll make announcements in April. And then from, I have a question, what is the deadline? So submission deadline for February, we will let you know once you've been successful. So we haven't actually set that date, but it will be a few weeks for you to be able to sort of develop your proposal. So in April we'll announce grantees, and one of the things that I feel I should mention just from the conversations that we've had is that we do want to also develop a bit of a cohort experience where, you know, you're able to sort of knowledge share. So when you do, if you do become a grantee, we'll try and create some sort of forum environment where people can really share ideas, learn from one another, because we understand that it can be a lonely road leading an organization. It's not always easy. It's nice to learn from one another. So that's just something to say that will sort of help you hopefully cultivate if that's something that you're interested in. So from May, we'll be doing things like that, but we'll also have a consultant on board to sort of support you through reviewing whatever came out of your organization health check. But also we appreciate that you know your organization best, and beyond the health check, if there are any areas that you think you need support with, we'll look to see how we can support you through sort of from May up until around September. And that's in August, September, we'll be doing some monitoring and evaluation, and our research and impact team will be on hand to support with that, and we'll give you a bit more information on what that looks like. But I'll just say right from the offset, we don't want to be a funder that are extremely burdensome in what we collect back from you. Like, this is really an opportunity for you guys to get exactly what you need from us. And so it will be minimal requirements in terms of monitoring and evaluation, reasonable requirements as well. And we can even work on seeing what looks good for organizations when we get to that point as well. So the total funding pot is £440,000. Olamide, that is correct, right? Yeah. So as I shared it a bit earlier on, pot one will 30 to 40k will be available for pot one, and 8 to 10k will be available for pot 2. And we would like to see, as much as possible, projects sort of starting quite soon after we've given the funding, and for you to be in a position where you can report on what you've spent the money on by sort of September 2023. So I don't know if you want to speak to that a bit more, Lamide.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Simi has mentioned, we're not expecting to be burdensome. There isn't sort of a fixed window of like a 6-month project necessarily. It could be existing work that you're doing and that you want to continue to either develop, whether it's to scale it or to develop a particular part of that organization. You know, if you want it specifically for I know, organizational development or marketing or branding, you know, that work is going to be much longer than 6 months, we recognize. So we don't want to put sort of a time stamp on it. More so it's for, as Simi's mentioned, to understand what the ground is, you know, what's happening on the ground from your perspective and from the communities that you're engaging with. So that monitoring and evaluation, it's more for us to better understand what you're seeing from the communities. What are the needs that they are having? And that's also based on what your needs are. How can you be better placed to support those communities through, you know, in order to, you know, to develop, I know, climate adaptation, ensuring that they are able to, you know, to build the resilience as you know, as the climate change crisis continues to progress. So there isn't a stop date on that.
Thanks, Lamide. And then just for us to quickly go back to the expression of interest, I think that's probably sort of pressing thing on everybody's mind right now. So just to give you an idea of what to expect when that link becomes live, we'll have 4 sections. So the first section is just around your organizational individual details that we need. And then section 2 will be looking more around your activity and engagement. So there are questions around more about the organization itself and what you do, how you sort of do what you do, why you do what you do, who you are in terms of leadership, whether or not you're a diverse led organization. So things around the organization specifically. And then we want to hear about the proposal and what you intend on using the money to do. And I just want to stress that this doesn't have to be perfect. It really is just to give us an idea of what you're thinking and where your heads are. That co-production of the eventual proposal, we will then flesh that out together and get you ready for panels. So it is just about you presenting your ideas essentially. And then finally, we'll sort of look at your impact and the work that you're currently doing and what you intend, how you intend to impact your communities through the fund itself. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, and that's what, yeah, we sort of see our role as being able to support you in developing that impact, being able to use the funding as a sort of, I don't know, springboard to be able to develop, demonstrate impact for other funders, etc. So again, we're not looking for perfection. It really is just an information gathering session to begin with for us internally. Agnes, you have your hand up.
Yeah, hi there. So you said getting us ready for panel if we submit an application. Who's on the panel? Or you might not know exactly who, but what is that, a mixture of organizations? Is it like, what does that look like?
So it looks like where possible, so what we would consider experts, people who are sort of working within the climate space, who understand. I think the key thing is that whoever sits on the panel has an understanding of the issues faced within the communities themselves. So they'll be representatives of you know, the climate space, but also the communities that we're looking to fund. We understand that panels can sometimes, you know, not necessarily be representative, and as a result, biases come in, etc. All of the stuff that we basically don't want to see. So we don't have exact specific names at the moment, but that's sort of the direction that we're hoping to go in. Alameda, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
No, that's essentially it. So someone, yeah, who's also, you know, got an exposure to the sort of grant making process and any of the barriers that might lead to people not necessarily being selected, they'll be able to identify also. But it will be community leaders, you know, climate experts, both practiced and lived, as well as sort of grant making practitioners.
Perfect, thank you. Do we have any